Lineup radio show where independent thought just can't be bought. I'm an American.
And you slide them up and down, right?
Red, white,
Yep.
blue. And I'm a citizen of this world. Land of heaven. Some things were meant to
Are you doing audio? You're doing an audio?
That's good.
Okay. Now, I'll tell you when it is. You just promo what you're going to be talking about. Say, hi, Kristen Chevrier. I'm here with blah, blah,
I've
blah.
got it all right here.
Oh, good. Here we go.
Okay. Good morning. You're listening to Ktalk Media's Liberty Lineup, where thought can't be bought. I'm Kristen Chevrier, and I'm here in the studio with Daren Jensen, father of Parker Jensen, who was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, a rare bone cancer in the femur bone in 2002. Join us in a few minutes to find out what really happened, where Parker is now, and how you can and must be proactive in taking charge of your family's health.
That was good. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn both of these up. These are the ones that you slide that down when you come into the
Yeah, I
break.
got all that.
Got it? Okay, here we go.
Hey, welcome back. We're Ktalk Media's Liberty Lineup, and I'm Kristen Chevrier, and I'm here with Daren Jensen, father of Parker Jensen. So I'd like all of you right now to just kind of take a minute to think back to 2002 and try to remember where you were. I know where I was. I had a toddler, and I had 4 older children, and I was getting up at 3 in the morning most mornings to tidy up my house and get ready to teach classes to private and homeschool students who came to my house for classes. So I know that's where I was, and that's where my thought process was, and I knew about Parker Jensen, but I didn't know the whole story. And even if I'd been paying attention, it sounds like maybe I wouldn't have known the full story. So Daren, welcome to the Liberty Lineup. And maybe you could give us just a little bit of background on where your family was before this event in 2002.
Sure. It's great to be on the show. We were like just any other family. Everything that we did was centered around our children. And one of those events was taking the kids to the dentist and ensuring that they had great health. So in 2002, we were off to the dentist with our son Parker to see how, to get his checkup. And he had been complaining about a little bump under his tongue, a little flap of skin. And so as the dentist looked at it, he goes, oh, yeah, that is a clogged saliva duct. It's something that we see very frequently, and it'll eventually go away. And so, like any other good parents concerned about their children, we did what the doctor said, and we watched it. And as we went back 6 months later, it was still there, and the doctor said, well, if it's bothering him or anything like that, you know how you get something under your tongue and it's just a nuisance,
Right.
And so he recommended if we could go to an oral surgeon and just have the little stalk of skin lopped off, it would be no big deal, and everything would be great. So we did as suggested. We went found an oral surgeon, and they said, yep, it's a clogged saliva duct, just like the dentist suggested. And he said, yeah, we can very easily remove it. So they took a little piece of,
Just a sample of tissue, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, he used a little tool and grabbed it.
Oh, you're trying to think of what the tool's called.
Yeah.
Well, I can't help you with that, sorry.
And just took a little teeny scalpel and just a little whack on the bottom of the stalk, and off it came, and no big deal. And he says that's standard procedure because he is a minor. We sent it off to a lab for analysis, so that's what they did.
And where was the lab?
Washington State.
Okay.
University of Washington.
University of Washington, okay.
So it was sent off for analysis, and a few days later, it came back, and I was sitting at work, and I received a call from the oral surgeon, and the oral surgeon said, "Hey, will you and Barbara come in and we'll discuss the results. So we went in, and he said, well, told us that the results came back ambiguous, but there was concern enough that we ought to go have it looked at. So he said he already had talked to Primary Children's Hospital and established an appointment up there, and we were to go up and visit that next few days with the doctor up there. And so we went home and told the children and said, Parker, we need to go up to Primary Children's, kind of see what's going on, and so up we went, just as we were instructed.
Like good parents.
Like good parents.
Yep.
So when we got there, we met a Dr. Wagner who was not the doctor that we were scheduled with. The scheduled doctor didn't show or had some other responsibility, I suppose. So in comes this young doctor, and they really didn't do anything with Parker. They just kind of looked in his mouth, weighed him, no tests, no nothing. Said we're analyzing the tissue, and we'll get back to you in about 10 days. And so, we were happy. We're going home, no big deal, and we're just kind of waiting for the call. So we, about 10 days later, we received a call from Primary Children's, and it brings back memories.
I'm sure.
It's okay. But when they called, they said Parker had Ewing sarcoma. And of course, like any other parents, it's like, well, what is that? And they explained to us it was a very rare bone cancer, normally originating in the femur bone or in the large bones of the body. And, being the parents, trusting, I guess, so we believed it. I mean, why wouldn't
of course.
Why wouldn't you?
They're the doctors.
They're
right?
the doctors, and they have
Wearing
the
the white
answers.
coats.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, being devastated, we went home and told our children the news and our family, and said, we have a serious medical issue that we have to start dealing with.
Just out of curiosity, we didn't talk about this yesterday. Did they say what stage of cancer it was?
No.
No. Okay.
Just-
That'll be interesting later.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
As we
okay.
talk about the story as it progressed,
Mhm.
it's a very good point. And so we started to prep, and we started to, we went back and met with the doctors at the hospital and kind of to understand what the process was. And it was interesting because that process was like no other I would ever have envisioned. And, we're a very healthy family. We don't go to the doctor very often, so it was a very new experience for us. I think the last time I was in the hospital was when I had my tonsils out when I was 12, and and so it was very new to us, and it's frightening, especially when you're dealing with what was explained to you as a life-threatening ailment with a child, and so you're trying to deal with the weight of the world and the situation of your child. So, we started going back and forth and having meetings, and it was explained to us that Parker would undergo a very extreme experimental regimen of chemotherapy.
Something that was new that they were working on for this particular kind of cancer. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It was strange to us because that regimen was written down on a napkin and handed to us and said, this is what he's going to take.
Wow.
Now, as we talk about the story, some of the things we'd like to bring out to help other people as well is not just our story, but what happened in the story that others could use in the same types of situation.
Right.
And it just so happens that one of the nurses says, listen, you guys need to request every record and keep everything as you go through this process, because it because of HIPAA laws, it'll facilitate the different doctors that will be treating Parker, that process.
Okay.
So, unbeknownst,
Turn your mic just a little bit, just so you're right in front of it.
sure.
Okay, thanks.
Unbeknownst to us, that was actually very good wisdom.
Yes.
And it wasn't to facilitate the doctor's process, but it was actually a helpful aid to us as we become more suspicious about the process and what was actually going on. We had all of these records. And so, beside me, I brought one of our book. We have 3 volumes that are about 4 inches thick of all the records.
Can you hold that up so they can see it on?
Of all the records and research that we did for Parker. So, so we established this record, this library for our case very early on, and it proved to be very beneficial as we get in the court dates and a lot of the things where we had to justify our actions.
Right. Thank goodness for the nurse.
Yes.
Because you were new. You would not have known to do that. You would have trusted them to keep the records.
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew what HIPAA was just because of work and, insurance forms and things like that. But I guess the intricacies of HIPAA, I had really didn't know nothing about that much. And so, we thought, we'll take their word for it, and we'll start creating a notebook. And so that's what we did.
Okay. So you were told that you needed to start chemo immediately.
Immediately. They wanted to put in what's called a central line or a direct access to his heart so that they could administer chemotherapy. Now, at the time, my wife's family is quite medical, and so we were immediately started to discuss the situation with them. And we were referred to specialists, cancer doctors, and we started to talk with them. And they would say, well, what about this test? And what about this test? Everything from x-rays to blood tests to different scans. And I said, well, we've never had any of those tests. And they're going, are you crazy? What are you thinking? You've got to go back and tell them that you want the tests and not allow treatment until these tests are done. And so we would go back, and that's where we started to get at odds with the hospital when we were saying, we want this test and we want this test. Because as parents, don't you want to know not only that he has it, but where it is, how he got it? There's all these questions.
How bad it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How it comes, that pour in because you want to know. At least we did. And so
we're getting close to a break. We've got about 20 seconds.
Sure.
And then we'll go to a break and come back with more.
So that's where we, that's started the argument and the odds with the hospital is they wanted to go straight to treatment. We wanted the test.
You wanted answers to questions. Mm-hmm. So to that point, no tests had been run. There had only been a tissue sample, and the tissue sample had shown some oddity, and the diagnosis was made strictly from the tissue sample.
Correct.
Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, so we are still on Facebook Live, so we can talk about other things or anything that is interesting that might. I mean, we obviously want to cover the key points when we're on air, but
The colors of Ktalk media are like the colors of the leaves in fall, a beautiful sight to behold and enjoy. Ktalk media.
So tell me just a little bit about Parker, just as a child at this stage. Like, what was going on with him? Did he look sick?
Oh, no. See, that was part of what was weird, because as we would go through, and that's kind of the next step in this, and because they're saying chemotherapy, and the distrust started to originate from those questions. I bet he doesn't eat very well. Well, no, he eats like a 12-year-old. he's great. And then they'd say, well, and I'd say, yeah, I bet, he'll start sleeping better. And it's like, well, he sleeps like 12 hours a day, just like any other 12-year-old, And everything that they would say was contradictory to what the real situation was. And so that's where we were kind of going, something's not making sense.
So when we get back on, we'll explain more about the process and then how you guys came to understand what was really going on.
Okay.
Okay. So we're just taking a break for just a couple minutes here, and then we'll be back with more. Okay, Diana says she's tuning in late. What's going on? I guess I can give a little update on that. We have Parker Jensen's father with us. I'm sure, Diana, you know who Parker Jensen is. He's a boy who was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, which is a rare bone cancer, in 2002. And we're just talking about the process and what happened, and this is his dad over here, and what the reality of the situation was, as opposed to what they were told. So, and it's a very, very interesting story. It is the things that you would have in your nightmares. I can't imagine a worse nightmare scenario than this one. So now we are coming back here to the radio. So stay with us. Okay, Daren, we're back on Ktalk Ktalk's Liberty lineup. I'll get it there eventually. This is Kristen Chevrier, and I am here in the studio with Daren Jensen, who is the father of Parker Jensen, who was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer in 2002. So far, we've talked about how it was diagnosed. There was no testing done. It was diagnosed strictly on the basis of a small tissue sample that looked strange. And chemotherapy was immediately ordered. So what happened next?
So in discussing the situation with the doctor, one of the things that I brought up, and as we met with them frequently over the next few weeks, was the fact that we got into a conversation about who would be managing, how the process would go. And I made the comment, well, I want to know and understand everything that's going on so I can make the right decision for my son. Because as a parent, obviously, you want to be involved and you're concerned and you have all of these questions. And upon expressing those requirements or my position about I wanted to understand the situation so I could make a good decision, the doctor looked at me and said, "You don't have a choice. I make the decisions on medical treatment." And I said, well, I understand that you have that knowledge, but I would have the final say on what approach we would take for treatment. And at that point, our first argument ensued about who would actually be running the treatment. Now, I'm not saying I'm a doctor. What I was trying to convey to the doctor was the fact that I understand my son better than anyone. He was saying things like, I bet he doesn't eat well and he doesn't sleep well. It's like, no, he sleeps great. He eats well. He acts, like any other boy, never had any symptoms that anything was wrong. So as the doctor would allude to all of these things, I would correct him and say, listen, that's not correct. And hence, the fact that a parent should be included in those decisions because they have information that could be very helpful. Unbeknownst to me, there were ulterior motives, and the doctor wasn't even interested in anything but his own agenda. And so with that, the relationship between us and Primary Children's started to degrade to the point where it was getting quite serious.
So you tried to get a second opinion and you went to Dr. Thompson. Where is Dr. Thompson located?
So Dr. Thompson was a doctor at LDS Hospital.
Okay. And then also in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, in Salt Lake City. So we figure, just like anybody else, we're going to do something different. I mean, we don't like this guy. He's not working with us. He was just bullheaded and was going to push into what he wanted to do. And a lot of things transpired between this and going elsewhere. Once, because we, at that point, before we started to get a second opinion, we were still trying to work with Primary Children's, but at that point, there were starting to be threats. And so, for example,
threats from Primary Children's.
Right. We were called into the administrative offices upstairs, and we were basically gang tackled by all the administration and the doctors and the department heads, and they threatened that they would have our child taken away from us if we didn't cooperate. And we would say things like, all we want to do is find out what's wrong with our child. And there was no way that we could dissuade them from doing their agenda. And so we started looking outside of Primary Children's. We actually told them, you're fired. And we walked out of the room. And
which really should be your prerogative as a parent, to be able to choose who is going to treat your child.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that our whole directive was we wanted to understand more. We wanted to understand the staging area. And at this point, and I showed you the...
Okay, and you were not avoiding treatment. You were not disbelieving the diagnosis. You were just trying to find the best remedy for the situation.
Absolutely.
Right.
We wanted to make the right decision for Parker that was an intellectual decision, not just we were part of a flow somewhere that we would wait in the waiting room and you would come and tell us what you were doing.
Right.
We wanted to know. And if you look at all the things I showed you during the break that you see on Facebook Live, the volumes of books that we have, I mean, we were in full research at this point, and family members themselves were also researching for us.
Who were also involved in the medical community, so they knew what to look for, right?
Absolutely. Or point us in directions to specialists. I mean, we talked to folks in Oklahoma. We had a friend that came up to us and said, hey, I know a renowned scientist in Austria, and we'll talk about that coming up, but that also is... foremost in his field, and if we needed him, we could, and so we were looking and searching and researching, but all we were getting from the hospital was like, you come here now, and bring Parker. And after that last instance, we never ever took Parker back. The meetings that we went to on our own, because we were starting to become afraid of what might happen, because people would start telling us about stories that the security just walked in and took their child. And so, and then at that point, we started, we were served with documents as we were reported to DCFS for medical neglect.
So you were served with these documents. Were you home when these documents came? You were at this time?
We were not home. We were called by the constable and said that he had documents to give us. And we said, well, we're not home. And so he goes, well, I need to serve you these. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. And so he goes, well, I'll call you back. So he called me back a few minutes later and he said, well, I was just told I could leave them on your front door.
Okay.
And so that's where we found them.
When you got back.
On our front door.
Okay.
And so when we opened them up, it said that there was an expedited hearing and that we were accused of child endangerment and medical neglect for refusing treatment.
Okay,
Yeah.
for those outside of Utah, DCFS is the Department of Child and Family Services.
Yeah, and so, as a parent, you can imagine reading these papers thinking, what, us? We've been trying relentlessly to find out what's going on with our son, but we feel like we were stonewalled by the hospital because they wouldn't do the tests. And so trying to go outside and find other doctors and,
Who would just run some tests so that you could see what stage it was and what the options were and that kind of thing, right? Because up until this point, for those who have just tuned in, all we have is a tissue sample that had been sent to the University of Washington, and it looked a little bit off.
right.
And that was what the diagnosis was based on for Ewing sarcoma bone cancer.
Correct.
Okay.
And not just a bone cancer, but the most rare form of bone cancer. There's only been, and as we started our research, we couldn't even find cases in Utah of Ewing sarcoma, and there had only been less than a dozen cases nationwide. So that's how rare we found it to be.
Okay, so you're looking for tests. Dr. Thompson, was he the next thing, or was Austria next?
Well, the next thing was, we were in and out of court. And so when I mean by court is juvenile court. So we would show up in court and we would present our case about what we were trying to do. The hospital was also there with the Attorney General's office, who are the prosecutors in juvenile court. And so throughout the summer, we were in and out of court. And it was a game, as I look back, it was just a game. It wasn't about Parker's treatment. It's about, at that point, who's strongest, who's going to win. Because it was never about Parker's health. The expedited hearing came about because the doctor reported to DCFS that Parker had 2 weeks to live. This was in April.
Who reported this?
The doctor.
The doctor reported that
To
DCFS, based on no tests,
no tests.
that Parker had 2 weeks to live.
Correct.
Okay.
And that will become significant later
Yeah.
on in the story.
Yeah,
that
pay
2
attention
weeks
to the
mark.
details here, because we're piecing together, it's just an amazing, incredible story.
So obviously, and you can imagine going into the courtroom and the doctor saying, yeah, 2 weeks to live. Well, not even the doctor. At this point, Dr. Wagner from the hospital had vanished. He's gone. He's no longer at the University of Utah. And he was the one that was supposed to take the next 11 months and guide the treatment. But now he's gone, and no one's saying where he's gone.
Did you ask? Or you just noticed that he was gone and replaced?
All that we heard from in court was that he was no longer on the case,
Okay.
and that and so. But at that point, it didn't matter because it was really DCFS against the Jensens, with support of the Huntsman Cancer Institute and a doctor there, and Primary Children's. And so they said that Parker had 2 weeks to live, and therefore they needed to expedite custody and take custody of the Jensens because we refused treatment. Now the judge, coming into this brand new, he's going, well, this seems a little aggressive, but what's the deal? We said that we didn't want to work with Primary Children's because of the threats and basically the bullying. And so he allowed us to get Parker onto another doctor. And so we said, well, we want to use a doctor in Austria. He is the general secretary of tumor marker oncology and for a world-renowned organization. And we will have him be the lead physician for Parker as we try to get more techs. The state and the doctors jumped up out of their chairs and said, no, they can't do that because he's not licensed to treat in the U.S. And we said, well, we'll go to Austria. That's where we'll take Parker to Austria.
Which again should be your choice. You should be able to go to Mexico or Canada or anywhere you want to treat your child. But we're finding out that doctors think that they are God. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, and just it's so confusing of why you think you have these fundamental rights of directing your family and your children and their health care, and you're trying to do everything you can to get to the bottom of the situation, to make a good decision as a parent. And so that's our mindset. And to have someone say, no, you can't go to a world-renowned doctor because they don't treat in the U.S. is like, what? That doesn't make sense. So they petitioned to have Parker's passport taken away, so we couldn't leave the country. And so the judge granted that. And so
his passport was taken away.
Yes. So we were given another couple weeks to find somebody else. So we then found the doctor that was the oncologist for the White House, and he agreed to have Parker as a patient. So we took his CV, which is his resume basically, back into court a week or so later, presented it to the judge, and we thought, we're golden, we're good. We'll go to DC, we'll have him evaluated, we'll get the test that we've been trying to get all along, and we're good, we're out. Well, come to find out that the same thing happened again. The hospital and the Attorney General's office said, no, you can't do that. Primary Children's is the regional specialist for the children here. You live here, you have to go there.
So the oncologist for the White House is willing to take this case, and they say you can't. And what did the judge say? The
judge said, agreed, or at least took the counsel of the state and the doctors, because they said, well, as good as he may be, he's not a pediatric oncologist, so he would know nothing about treating children. So the Jensens have to go to Primary Children's Hospital. And the judge agreed. Unbeknownst to us, I was like, what?
So when you say the state, you're talking about the state attorney general's office? Or who
the state, in my mind, at this point, is a combination of DCFS,
okay,
the guardian ad litem's office,
okay,
and the attorney general's office.
All right.
So if you can imagine, those were the organizations we were up against.
Just two regular people, parents of a child who care about what happens to their child, and you're up against, well, basically three monster organizations, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, previous to this, 30 days prior, 60 days prior, the biggest decisions that we made as a family was what were we going to have for dinner. Like so many people, our lives
Where are we going on vacation?
Exactly.
And it seems after I talked to you that it was usually someplace kind of local, Bear Lake, up to see the grandparents in Pocatello, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, those are just regular weekend activities and, water skiing and things like that we normally do.
Not politically involved.
Not any more than anybody else. We
Right.
vote every time, and we kind of, do our civic duty. But as far as getting deeply involved,
Okay, we're coming to a break again. So we're gonna take a break, and we'll be right back with more on Parker Jensen. Yikes.
Just like daylight savings time in the fall, it's time to fall back in love.
Okay,
with Ktalk Media.
so short break, and then we have the final segment for this hour, and then we'll go into the next hour, and we'll just talk as long as we need to get the full story.
okay.
Okay, so we've still got about 15 minutes left in this hour.
Okay. Yeah, we can finish up the story just in that 15 minutes. Is that what you're saying?
Okay. Yeah, no, you don't have to finish it in that 15 minutes. No, I'm just saying that's what we have left in this hour. We can carry it over to the next hour. And then we also wanted to talk about kind of some of the suggestions that we have for other, or that you have for other people after going through this experience. But that's not going to take a whole long time.
Yeah.
So just take your time on the story. There's a lot to tell.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so just take us through the next stage in the next 15 minutes, and then we'll start into we'll just pick up where we left off in the next hour.
Okay.
Because it's quite a story. Yeah, well, Paula, we didn't. I'm looking at your comment here. I wish we'd known what was going on. I think most of us here didn't know what was going on. There are a few people who've been politically involved, heavily politically involved over the last 3 decades who knew what was going on. But the rest of us, I think we were just kind of thinking that things were okay. I mean, there wasn't anything too bad happening in Utah at the time, right? So we didn't have any kind of advocacy groups for medical freedom at that point. That's been a very recent development. And Jacqueline is asking, I didn't know about Parker. How is he today? We're going to tell you. In the next hour, we'll be talking about what he's doing now and what the outcome of the diagnosis and all of this was. We actually do have one, Paula. It's just in the works. We're just working on it. So over the next hour, as Daren finishes up this story, we'll be happy to take phone calls. I would encourage people to ask only about Daren, his family, and Parker, and not tell their own stories. I know there are lots of these kinds of stories. So the call-in number is 801-254-1640. 801-254-1640. But again, hold off on calls for just a little bit so that we can let him finish telling his story. Shelley, yes, they are writing a book. Encourage them to finish it. So hang on, we'll be back. You're saying thank you for telling your story on here. It's not the usual bumper music.
What's that?
I guess this is new bumper music. So we're back on Ktalk Radio with Kristen Chevrier and Daren Jensen. Daren is the father of Parker Jensen, who was diagnosed in 2002 with a rare form of bone cancer called Ewing sarcoma. And it's only in the femur bone? Or just they were saying his was?
Yeah, with our research, Ewing sarcoma in general originates in the large bones of the body. Usually, like 95% is in the femur bone. Very rarely it will manifest itself in other large bones, but that is primarily where it comes.
Okay, so let's see, where were we when we left off? We were, I think you were going to get, the judge was trying to work through so you could get a diagnosis. We had ruled out Austria, a highly renowned expert in Austria. You were not allowed to speak to him. The passport for Parker was confiscated so that he couldn't leave the country to go get help from this person in Austria. So then you tried to go to the White House oncologist.
Right.
And because he specialized in adults and not in children, the court ruled that you couldn't have him help you either. So what happened next?
So that whole summer of 2003 was really in and out of court, trying to find someone who we were comfortable with, because we were looking at a diagnosis and a treatment plan that was so severe.
Oh my gosh. The mics were off on the radio. I'm sorry. Okay, so we were just starting where we left off. That we couldn't go to Austria, we couldn't go to the White House oncologist, and now, sorry.
And now it's much of the same thing throughout the summer of 2003. As we were in and out of juvenile court, is trying to find a doctor. And this is so important for everyone out there to feel comfortable with whoever's going to treat you. You should feel comfortable and not have to feel like you have to be there. because trust in medical treatment is so important. And so that's what we wanted to find. We wanted to find someone that would start at the beginning of Parker and test and work up to where we needed to be. Because one thing that was explained to us is no matter what staging plan, because we were starting to bring this out with the doctors, is listen, we don't even know what stage he's in. And if you know anything about cancer, it's 1 through 4. But what was explained to us on the treatment plan is it didn't matter. So whether he had boils and all these things all over him, or
Okay, no testing was done. The diagnosis again was just on one piece of tissue. And it doesn't matter which stage of cancer he's in, but he only has 2 weeks to live?
correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I had it straight. Go ahead.
So you're as confused as we are at this point,
Mhm.
right? And so really it was a shuffle game all summer of trying to find the right doctor. So, and doctor after doctor that we presented to the court was always checked by the state. And I say state because the Attorney General's office is really the prosecution at this time, representing the doctors and DCFS. And so, so when I say state, I mean this conglomerate of folks that are wanting Parker and petitioning every time to take custody under the accusation that we are not trying and we are refusing treatment for our son. When in reality, we're trying to do all that we can.
You were doing a whole lot more than they were.
Yes.
Being proactive, doing research, trying to find doctors who were specialists, all of this, and then you were accused of neglect
Right.
and threatened to have your son taken away. They threatened to take away your son.
And so in July, I actually quit my job to focus on Parker because everything was getting so out of hand. Court dates every week. We were flying places to try to get opinions. We'd have to come back to court, but also at this time too, we were getting to where the Jensen name in the media was, and this case was starting to blow up, and no doctor would touch us with a 10-foot pole. They didn't want to get involved, and we started to realize that we were on a huge uphill battle. And so one of our attorneys said that they're, one of those, I have a friend that has a cousin that has a friend that works in this field, and so we were referred to a doctor in LA Children's Hospital. And so we presented that to the court saying, okay, well, we're going to go down to LA Children's and get this second opinion. And that, because that was the big deal, is trying to get someone to take over Parker's so-called analysis or treatment. That no treatment has been done at this point. Still the investigation work. And so we were granted to go down to LA Children's and have a second opinion.
So the judge said it's okay, the
Yeah.
doctor said it's
Yeah.
okay, you can go to LA Children's and get a second opinion.
But
Okay.
this was like the 4th or 5th court date, and everybody, and the doctor was getting really upset with the Jensens because we wouldn't conform.
Okay, and which doctor is this now? Is it the same one that you started with, or is he back?
No.
Or you got a
he's-
different one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay,
this doctor was in Los Angeles, and so we went down there. Well, prior to going down, we got all the things that we had at the time, and so we had them sent down to LA Children's. So we met with the doctor. We gave him the story. We gave him the lab results from Washington and whatever else, everything that we had.
From University of Washington.
Right.
Okay.
And as we sat there in his office, he had this folder in his lap with the things that we sent him. And he was kind of, flipping through it. And he'd say, well, has there been a blood test? No. Has there been this? No. Now, we did have our own blood test done, and that was in the packet. And he would ask us all these questions. It's like, well, everything's right there, doctor, and he goes, and we could tell he had not really reviewed it at all. And he goes, he closes it, and I remember this distinctly. And he leans back in his chair and he says, Primary Children's is a good hospital. I just concur with them. That was our second opinion.
Awesome.
And so when we got back to, we had court that next, I think 2 days later. So we had to get back from LA, go get to court. And Dr. Tischler, who was the doctor in LA, testified in court that it would be better to tie Parker down to a gurney, force chemotherapy after taking him away from his parents, and at 21 years old, dealing with the psychological effects of removing him from his family.
Wait, how old is he at
He
this
was
point?
12 at the time.
He was 12 at this point.
Right. So
Okay.
they would relinquish, it was better to relinquish custody, take custody from us, force him through chemotherapy, and whatever results happened,
Okay, we're good. Sorry, go ahead.
and then
Hold
give him
on.
back to the parents.
Mhm.
And then when he was older, deal with the psychological effects of the event. That was his testimony
Okay,
to the court.
so that's what they felt was best for Parker.
Well, that's what the doctor from LA Children's testified in court of what should happen.
Okay,
That was our second opinion.
wow.
So the judge, you would think a normal person would go, "What? That's crazy." But the judge was really annoyed with us at this point because we would not give up Parker. And now, remember, in April of that year is when the doctor said he had 2 weeks to live. It's now the end of July. Parker's still around.
Oh, how strange.
And no one's saying, well, wait, it's been 3 months, 4 months since he was supposed to die 2 weeks ago.
And they were just testifying in court that when he was 21, he could
Exactly.
He could
Exactly.
recover emotionally from
Yeah.
the trauma.
They-
Okay, good.
And so, but at that point, it wasn't about Parker's health. It's about who's going to win.
Yeah.
Because we've had through the summer, political people, representatives, senators starting to
take notice and
take notice, not get
Right.
involved. But, the case was widely publicized, and there was a lot of media coverage on it because of this fight, right, between the state and a family. And so at the end of July, we were ordered by the court to have Parker in chemotherapy treatment by the 8th of August. And this is what the order was, is we had to have him in chemotherapy treatment somewhere. And if not,
by August 8th.
by August 8th,
Okay.
and if not, then they would have an evidentiary hearing, which is basically present your evidence, because we didn't have a lot of evidence that we presented at this point, because there wasn't any.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because you hadn't been able to really get a second opinion.
we couldn't find anybody, that would either touch us or
who wasn't already tainted.
wasn't already tainted.
Mm-hmm.
And so there would be an evidentiary hearing later on that month in 2 weeks. Well, the 1st of August, we found a clinic, and we realized that there's no way we were going to get any type of fair shake if we were in the primary or the children's network. Every major city has a children's hospital. And we would not, with media coverage and everything, we would not get a fair shake.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were looking for private clinics that could not be influenced. And so we found an institute in Houston, the Brzezinski Institute. And they worked with a lot of different national organizations, as well as MD Anderson, which is a famous cancer treatment center, world-renowned, MD Anderson. And so we'll go to Brzezinski. And so,
And this is all more evidence of your neglect.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so we made arrangements to go down at our own expense because insurance didn't cover it. And we would do a 2-week evaluation, and they would go soup to nuts, everything to find out what was going on. We sent them everything, and they're going, yep, he qualifies, come on down, and we'll do it. So they couldn't get us into August 12th. So Parker wanted to do one last vacation before.
Right, because he was going to die anytime, right?
That's right, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
he didn't believe it. And one little piece that I left out early on that summer, as we're trying to frantically find out what's going on, Parker came to us, you know, as a 12-year-old. And this is always emotional for me, but he came to us, he said, Mom, Dad, I'm not sick. And at that point, the feeling that we had in us was, you're right. And it all made sense at that time, and we felt in our hearts that he was not sick.
Okay, so that's where we'll pick up in just a minute. We're going to commercials, and we'll be right back. So, hearts are better. Don't do angry faces.
What did he say?
If you do hearts, if you do hearts on the Facebook Live, it gives you more visibility. If you do angry faces, then it cuts back. That's my understanding. I don't know. Somebody else could explain it better probably. But okay, so for the Facebook Live people, we're just continuing to talk with Parker Jensen's father about what actually happened during the whole saga of his. Come out here, Paula. You can give him a hug. So this is the stuff nightmares are made of. I really cannot imagine anything worse than being threatened with the loss of your child, especially when you're doing everything in your power. I mean, you guys moved mountains to try to get him appropriate treatment, and to be accused of neglect. When you can look around anywhere and see neglect, you can see abuse, and you can see all kinds of things that should be addressed by a body such as DCFS that are not addressed. And yet here you have a family who's doing everything, spending all kinds of money, just no holds barred, trying to get appropriate treatment from whoever whoever they're allowed to get it from, and they're being threatened with the loss of their child. It's just appalling. Anyway, there were a couple of phone calls during the last segment there, but I really want to hear the story and then take the questions. And I apologize to anyone who's tried to call in. I will take calls after we kind of get through the story. So we're at the top of the hour now, and we'll be coming back. Why am I talking into the microphone? We're on Facebook Live. Anyway, so we'll be back. It's the top of the hour. We'll be starting into the next hour, and we'll continue.
The president does Radio Row, a nomination withdrawn.
Hang on.
I'm Richard Johnson. The White House is hosting several radio talk show hosts today, allowing the president to drop by and offer thoughts on several subjects, like the near victory over ISIS in Raqqa.
ISIS is now giving up. They're giving up. They're raising their hands. They're walking off. Nobody's ever seen that before.
The president on the Chris Plant Show on Westwood One. Also making the Plant Show, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney talking tax overhaul.
That the tax laws in this country need to be simpler. They need to be fair. They need to be better.
The overhaul got a boost this week when Republican Senators Rand Paul and Lisa Murkowski said they would probably support the measure. Pennsylvania Congressman Tom Marino was one of the first to support Donald Trump's run for the White House.
When the time came for the White House to pick Director of Drug Policy Control, Marino was it. Now he's out. The nomination's been withdrawn.
Correspondent Joe Johns on Capitol Hill. Marino's name came up as the driving force behind what's now a law curtailing the DEA's authority over opioid distribution. The Senate committee wants credit bureaus to do a better job with security.
The Senate Banking Committee is hearing from consumer watchdog groups on proposals for keeping personal data private. Ohio Sheriff Brown saying there's more data collected than we may realize.
Work histories, our social media profiles from reward cards that track our purchases at the grocery store, even information from our cell phones tracking our daily commutes.
The IRS has just canceled the contract with Equifax.
Correspondent Michael Toscano in Washington. More Northern Californians are returning home, or to the places where their homes once stood. Some 6,000 houses, businesses, and other structures have been destroyed by fires, and it's not over. Blaze flared up overnight in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm Rich Johnson.
Okay.
A fast, easy way to get great deals on travel. All yours on One Travel. Convenience is key. From our quick download mobile app to great airline, hotel, car rental, and vacation deals at your fingertips instantly. Join the One Travel Rewards program and earn points to use on future One Travel purchases. Use our app to book and double your points. Book a hotel and earn triple points.
Thank you.
Go to onetravel.com or call 888-898-2471. That's 888-898-2471.
Increase strength, fuel athletic performance. Get amped at GNC. As part of your workout program, GNC Amp Waybolic Protein is clinically proven to increase strength in just 8 weeks. For a limited time, buy one GNC Amp Protein, get one half off. Mix and match GNC's #1 selling protein between original, power, and rich powders. Amplify your strength today with buy one, get one half off GNC Amp Protein. Hustle into GNC or visit GNC.com before November 1st. Get undefeated protein performance only at GNC.
Will we ever see Tiger Woods back on the golf tour? Looks like he is cleared.
Okay, so if some of you have just tuned in, we've spent the last hour talking with Daren Jensen, who is the father of Parker Jensen. Parker was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer, Ewing sarcoma, in 2002, and we're talking about the story of what happened with that diagnosis. The diagnosis was based solely on a tissue sample that was sent to the University of Washington and sent back. They felt like it looked a little strange, and on that, no further tests, they diagnosed bone cancer and said that he had 2 weeks to live. So at this point, it's 3 months later, right? It's 3 months after the 2-week deadline for Parker to be gone, and he's still hanging on. And Parker, his dad just pointed out that Parker had come to them right about this time and said, "I'm not sick. I know I'm not sick." And they agreed with him. So that's where we are. They had been to multiple doctors, Austria, trying to go to Austria. Passport was confiscated so that they couldn't go to Austria. They tried to use the White House oncologist and were denied. And so now they are trying to get to Houston, to the Brzezinski Institute, to get a second opinion, to get more tests run, to do this right. And that's where we're going to pick it up in just a few minutes. So I think we've got about another minute and a half of the break, and then we'll be back with more of the story. Thanks for hanging in there. So,
call us for a free consultation and get access to advice on how to maximize your benefits from an economist, Boston University professor, and a frequent contributor to Forbes Calendar magazine.
Yes. I didn't eat breakfast, so I was too busy going over notes. But it's a fascinating story. A fascinating and terrifying story.
Yeah, when I met with the governor last month on this court appointment for Susan Eisen.
And you want them to hear?
What's that?
You want them to hear you?
No.
Okay, well, let's talk about it later.
He said like that, and I've heard this from a lot of people, because
Hold on, hold that thought. We're coming back. Okay, we're back on the air.
a Thought Police free zone. The Liberty Lineup radio show, where independent thought just can't be bought.
I'm an American. Red, white, and blue.
Aren't you going to do that?
And I'm a citizen of this world. And no heaven, so things will have to be together. I believe in faith and freedom. Got a country too. I believe in faith and freedom. We're gonna make it through.
Okay, welcome back to Ktalk's Liberty Lineup. I'm here in the studio. This is Kristen Chevrier. I'm here with Daren Jensen, who is Parker Jensen's father, and we are talking about Parker's diagnosis with Ewing sarcoma in 2002 and the events that ensued there. And we'll be back in just a few seconds after we take a little break here for commercials. We would also like to thank our sponsor, the Ktalk Media sponsor, medicalcostshare.com. medicalcostshare, all one word.com. You can opt out of Obamacare, and this is not insurance, it's better. We'll be right back. Oh, we'll be really right back. Okay, we are back. So Daren has just been telling us about the saga, and you can go back and watch what we've already discussed. But at this point, we are on our way to Houston, to the Brzezinski Institute, as a final effort to get some kind of clarity about what is actually going on with Parker.
Yeah, so, the whole summer has just been a whirlwind of going back and forth in court, and we finally found a solution that we thought, the court will take it. It's great for us because they do a variety of things, and their reputation is renowned, and we'll go there. Now, we are working under a mandate from the court that we have to have Parker in chemotherapy treatment by August 8th, and it's like August 2nd or 3rd. And so as we got word back from the Brzezinski Institute in Houston, they said that they couldn't work us in until the 12th. And so our attorneys said, hey, just go and go down for the 2 weeks of the analysis so you can come back, and at the end of August we'll show up with at the evidentiary hearing. Since we missed the August 8th deadline, we'll show up at the evidentiary hearing
with the evidence,
with all the evidence,
right.
And it'll be